this. You're catching the replay. Hey, Instagram. This is the replay. I'm Brianca Hardy, the Inner Healing Life Coach. And on tonight, we're talking about boundaries. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. Let me do something really quickly, and then we're going to get this ball rolling. Happy Monday. Hey everyone that's coming on. Okay. Hi everyone. Sorry, my voice. Okay. Hello everyone. Hello everyone. Happy Monday. We are doing a 4-part series on why loving yourself and respecting yourself is essential. So tonight we're going to be talking about boundaries. We're on part 2, so I'm super excited about tonight. Last Monday was really awesome, so I'm excited to jump into the 4-part series, or part 2 of the 4-part series. For those that do not know, I'm Brianca Hardy, the Inner Healing Life Coach. I specialize in all things inner healing. I am purposed to help you cultivate self-love and self-respect for yourself, to help you and teach you how to heal from toxic relationships, as well as how to overcome mother wounds and father wounds. And so all of that is really important, because when we go through traumatic experiences or a hard season, guess what? Our soul has wounds, and it is my purpose to help you get at the root of those wounds so you can deal with them and heal with them completely and wholly, right? So that's a little bit about me. Make sure you share this live. Be sure to invite some people that you know need this live in particular. You know someone that they've been struggling with loving themselves. You can hear how they talk, that it doesn't sound like they're respecting themselves. You can see how they have accepted different type of relationships, and it shows that they don't respect themselves. So invite them to the live, and invite someone that you feel like maybe is not really sure what boundaries are and what they look like. So be sure to do that. So we're going to go ahead and get right into it. I have my notes, so I'll be looking at them. Alrighty, so like I said, each time that we do come together and I do this series, I'm going to be starting off with the foundation every time. And that foundation is, what is self-love and what is self-respect? So we're talking about loving and respecting yourself more, all right? And loving and respecting yourself more. And so what is self-love? What is self-respect? So self-love is you knowing, or rather self-love is when you're able to say that you are choosing to walk away from something if it doesn't bring you happiness or it's not good for your well-being, right? Self-respect is knowing if something is not good for you, if it's not bringing you happiness or well-being, you're choosing to walk away from that, having high regard for your happiness and having a high regard for your well-being. We watered that all down to say basically that self-love is you choosing you, all right? You making you a priority in your life. That doesn't mean that anyone is forgotten about. That doesn't mean that your husband, your spouse, right, your loved one is forgotten about. It's just you are on that priority list as well. Okay. Now, self-respect is a little bit different, but very similar. So self-respect is having a high regard for yourself, but believing and knowing that you are worthy of being treated well. Right. So that's believing and knowing, like, I deserve respect. I deserve honor. And so, those two definitions are critical, because that's what we're going to be talking about. It's essential. I want you to go into this new year knowing that you deserve to love yourself, that you're worthy of that your happiness is important. I want you to go into this new year knowing that you deserve respect and to be treated well. Like we talked about on last week, is everyone going to treat you well? No, they're not, right? But it's it's important for you to know and essential for you to know that if you're not being treated well, to remove yourself, right? Or to address that. And so on tonight, we're going to be talking about boundaries, and talking about how you can address that and the importance of addressing that. Okay. So it's important. You already know I love definitions. Okay. So we're going to be breaking down what is boundary. All right. So boundary is defined as a line that makes the limits of an area. Come on. Limitations. A line that makes a limit, right? Okay. Or it says a dividing line. And some synonyms for boundary were border, frontier, partition, perimeter. So these are all lines, right? You can't go past the perimeter. That partition will block you. So these are talking about like there's a limit. So boundaries let us know that there is a limit. Okay? There is a limit. And so this is really, really important because we all have limits, right? We all have limits and should have limits, right? Because we're all different. And so we should have limits. Everyone has borders. Everyone has boundaries. Everyone has their own frontier. And we can literally break this down. Husband and wife, they have their own frontiers. In every relationship, there is going to be a boundary set. Husband and wives, you all have your own frontiers, right? In our marriage, this is how we're going to run it. You may say in your household, in our household, this is how we're going to do it, right? Whatever that is, that's a boundary that you have. In our household, we're not going to yell. In our household, we're not going to go to bed angry at each other. Whatever that's a boundary that you have. Parents have boundaries with their children. Hey, when mommy's in reading her book, that's her quiet time. Hey, when daddy's working on the car, that's his quiet time. That's a boundary that is put in place. So we all have limits. Did you know that God even has boundaries? Come on, God has boundaries. One example of his boundaries is the 10 Commandments. Thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not have any other God before me. That's a boundary. My friend Jessica explained it like this, that God has a boundary so much so that was the reason that Satan got put out of his kingdom. Why? Because Satan crossed the limits of God. Oh, okay, Satan, you think you finna come in this kingdom and you think you finna allow pride to get in this kingdom? No, God said, I have a boundary. And Satan, you have crossed my boundary. So therefore, what did God do? X him out. So that is the perfect example of what we need to do with our boundaries. Listen, God had self-love. Come on, somebody. And he had self-respect for himself. He had self-love and self-respect for his kingdom. Okay? And that's how we should have for ourselves. Your body is a temple, is a kingdom. Have self-love and self-respect. What's a part of this kingdom? What's a part of this temple? Your soul, your mind, your well-being, your happiness. So we too need to model ourselves after God. Come on, remove the person from your presence. They want to have pride. They want to have that whatever it is, remove. And so every relationship has a boundary. Every relationship have a boundary. And so healthy boundaries are essential. They are needed. They are critical to a good relationship, right? They are critical to a good relationships. And boundaries are not just needed for romantic relationships. So when I'm saying relationships, I'm not just talking about romantic relationships, although it is super easy to just pinpoint there. So you may hear me refer a lot to that. But I'm also talking about friendships. I'm also talking about, like I said, a mother and a child, adult child and a mother, adult child and a father. I'm talking about all forms of relationships, right? There should be boundaries because they're healthy, they're needed, they're essential, right? So when we create boundaries, guess what happens? Anytime you create a boundary, it is going to be tested. Can I say that again? Anytime you create a boundary, it is going to be tested. Why? Because that's human nature. That's how we are. That's just how it's so innate in us. When we create a boundary, it's tested. Think about this. Kids do this to their parents all the time. When they're young, they're toddlers, they're sitting in their high chair and they take some food and they throw it on the ground. They're testing a boundary because they want to know, what's the response that I could get if I do this? I've noticed, the kid says, I noticed, right, that everyone else, they put their food in their mouth and they eat it, and no one has ever dropped their food on the floor intentionally. So what happens? What will mom do if I do that? What will dad do if I do that? So even as a child, we innately test boundaries, right? And that child will not know that a boundary has been crossed unless the parent says something. All right? So, wives, you can test your boundaries with your husbands. Your husband may say, hey baby, we said that, we're going to stick on a budget. I see you've been using your card and I seeing all these type of Amazon boxes coming and all this stuff. And we're on a budget. So I really want us to stick to that budget. So let's just slow up on that, right? And so wives, you may test the boundary by saying, okay, I'm going to order something. I know he said budget, but I'm going to order something. I'm going to add something in there for him. Right? And so if that order comes in and you give him something and he doesn't say anything, you're like, okay. Right? That boundary was tested. Your husband identified it, made a boundary, and you tested that boundary of, well, what happens if I slide something in there for him? Right? Husband may test their wife's boundary and husband may say, hey, I'll call you at 10 a.m., right? I'll call you at 10 a.m. or I'll call you when I get to work. And the husband doesn't call when he gets at work, or he doesn't call at the set time, and the wife doesn't say anything. Guess what? A boundary has been tested. Okay? And it's up to the person to say, hey, I realize that you said you weren't going to buy any other boxes from Amazon. I realize that you said you were going to call me and you didn't. A boundary has been tested. And this is not malicious. People oftentimes, not all the time, but oftentimes we test each other boundaries and we're not even being malicious. It's just human nature, right? It's just natural to do that. So I do want to say that. Can you all see now how boundaries are so essential, how they're needed, that miscommunication can happen if boundaries aren't set? There's a wise man by the name of Elder Hughley who has passed away now, but he used to say it like this. And he said, if I stepped on your toe and you don't say ouch, I don't know that I've stepped on your toe. How else am I going to know that I've stepped on your toe unless you tell me ouch, right? And similar to how those boundaries are, how else will your loved one, your friend know that they have crossed the line if you don't bring it to their attention, right? And so here, passive aggressiveness, that doesn't work. Can I talk about myself? Being passive doesn't work with boundaries. You cannot be passive with your boundaries. Why? Because it's a limit. It's a perimeter. It's a border, right? So, like I said, boundaries are essential, they are important, they are a part of every relationship. So, one of the reasons that we need boundaries is because they protect your yes, right? You need a boundary because it protects your yes. And let me just say this to the singles really quickly. Have your boundaries set before you get into a relationship. Have your boundary list set before you get into a relationship. Can I speak from experience? Because if you don't have your boundaries set, guess what? You're going to see a nice, attractive guy, and those boundaries, because you did not have those limits set, they're going to be watered down very quickly because of what you see in front of your eyes. But if I have a firm foundation, come on, and my boundaries are set, listen, if I said that I don't want a smoker, just because you're so attractive, if you smoke, my boundary has been crossed. So I'm not even going to entertain you. Why? Because I already set my boundary. Right? So a boundary, think of the boundary not only as limits, but think of your boundaries as firm foundations. The truth of it is with spouses, it's not too late to set boundaries. It is never too late to set boundaries. You can have a come to the table moment. Hey, I think we really need to consider some things. What are your boundaries, husband? What are your boundaries, wives? And let's talk about it. And let's come together so we can meet each other, right? Because it's all about when you self-love and self-respect yourself, you can easily give it to your spouse. You can easily give it to a friend. You can easily give it to a loved one. So those boundaries are critical. And like I said, you want to have it set up before. Let me give you this quick little tip. I'm going to add this in. I didn't plan on it, but I'm going to add this in. I encourage you, no matter which relationship that we're talking about, I'm even talking about work dynamics. Some people can try to overload you with work, somebody else work. You need to have even in your relationships, what's your boundaries and what's your standards with that, right? How are you looking at it? If you get overloaded with work, are you saying, okay, that's fine because I want to be sharpened in these skills? Or are you saying, no, I got a lot on my plate already. Here's my boundary. I'll get back to you. Or yes, I'll do what you said, but let me just work on what I need to work on, and then I'll get to yours when I can. Does that make sense? Like creating those boundaries in every dynamic. And so what I want to encourage you to do in your marriage, if you're single, in work, create a list of top 10 boundaries, right? You can call them boundaries or standards. Your top 10 boundaries or standards that you have for singles before you get into a relationship. Create that list. What is that list? And I want you to memorize that list. Right? So you know, it's like clockwork. I know if she don't look like this, right? If she don't act like this, if she does this, right? Talking to the men, then this is how you know that boundary list, right? You stick to it. So anyways, boundaries protect your yes. Okay? Boundaries protect your yes. Because oftentimes we say yes to things that we really don't want to say yes to. And oftentimes we say yes because of what I like to call fog, because of fear, obligation, or guilt. F-O-G, fog. We say yes to a lot of things because we fear, well, what would this person think if I don't say yes, right? Obligation, well, they've done it for me, so I got to do it for them, right? And then guilt, well, I feel so guilty because they were here for me in that point in time, and if I don't come to this event, blah, 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 right? And so a lot of times we say yes out of fear, out of obligation, out of guilt. But if you set your boundaries up of, let's say your boundary is on Mondays, it's my day, and I'm choosing to really be there for myself, give myself self-love and self-care. If that's your boundary and someone says, hey, you want to go hang out, and you're really just not in the mood to hang out? No, my boundary is on Mondays. I really just tend to self-love and self-care. Or on Monday nights, me and my husband, we go out. Or on Monday nights, me and my boyfriend or girlfriend, we hang out. Set that boundary and stick to it, okay? So that it can protect your yes, right? So you're not freely handing out yes to people, right? Out of fear. That you're not freely handing out yes to people out of obligation and guilt. That you can be picky with your yes, right? That's self-love. That's self-respect. I'm a dancer, so a lot of times people ask me, hey, can you dance at this event and dance at that event? And if I said yes to every engagement, I would be driving myself crazy. And you know what? For a long time, I was saying yes to every engagement, right? And that drove me crazy. Why? Because I was saying yes out of fear. I was saying yes out of guilt, out of obligation. And I began to loathe dancing. All right. And I'm trying to get out of that place, but I began to really despise dancing because my yes was not protected and I didn't create standards or borders for myself. Right? Okay. When the important reason why you need boundaries is because it reminds you that you are priority. Remember, self-love is saying that you have a high regard for your well-being and your happiness. And if it's not good for your well-being, if it's not shaping your character, if it's not bringing you happiness, right? You have the ability to say, hey, no, I'm choosing my happiness, my well-being as priority. Remember, self-respect is simply saying, knowing and believing that you deserve to be treated. So if you're in a relationship and you're not treated well, come on, let's go back to why boundaries are needed. Why? Because it makes me priority. It puts me back at the priority list. Okay. And another reason boundaries are needed so that you can make others aware of your standards, right? In that example where I was talking about the child, that they throw food on the floor. And if the mother doesn't say anything, well, then the child is not aware of the boundaries, right? And so if the mother does say something, now the child is aware that there's a boundary, right? That food doesn't go on the ground. I can't get to throw it anywhere. Now that I'm getting older, I use food to eat, and that's all I need to be doing, right? So boundaries are important because they make others aware of what? Your limits. Right? They make others aware of your border, your partition. Alrighty. And so, closing up, what happens if you don't have boundaries? You give out your yes freely. right? You get like me, you get tired, right? If you don't have boundaries, speaking from experience, others will create boundaries for you. That's probably the worst place to be in, right? When you don't have your own boundaries and so somebody else is like, okay, I'm going to create boundaries for you, right? You're going to accept this and you're going to take this and I'm going to talk to you this way. You're going to take this treatment. That was a clear sign. Me not having the boundaries was a clear sign that I did not have self-love or self-respect for myself, right? And so those boundaries, having them in place now reminds me how important it is to have boundaries, to have standards, right? To say, okay, if I see this type of treatment, now I get in situations now where I'm like, okay, if I see a red flag, because my boundaries are firm foundation, I see a red flag, I'm not like, oh, is that yellow or is that red? I'm now in a place where I'm like, that's clearly red, right? Don't play with it. Don't flirt with it. Stick to your boundaries. Stick to your standards. And then if you don't have boundaries, you become emotionally blackmailed, right? And that's once again playing on that fear, obligation, and guilt. And people can use emotional blackmail against you, right? Oh, you really should come, or you really should do this, and you really don't want to do that, right? And then you could feel once again guilty for not doing it or obligated. So boundaries are critical. They are essential. They are needed. They are mandatory, right? And there's a scripture that says this. I'm just saying a part of it, but it's Psalms 147:14. And it says, He, talking about God, He makes peace in your borders, right? God will make peace in your borders, right? But the thing about these boundaries and these borders, you have to give them over to Christ. Well, Christ, what are you saying? Right? What are the boundaries that I should create for myself? I think that's the best way to do that exercise, is to bring God into that. What type of boundaries should I create for myself? God, you know me, you know my personality. So what should I create? How does this look for me? You know how self-love and self-respect. Come on. So what do these boundaries need to look like for me in my marriage, in my singleness, in my friendships? How does that look? All right. So I hope this was extremely helpful, talking about boundaries, talking about the needed form of them, and even giving you all that exercise of writing out your top 10 boundaries and standards for various forms of relationships. And like I said, hopefully that will help. If you do the work, I'm living proof that you will begin to honestly, you will see a change in yourself. And it really boosts up your confidence. And we'll be talking about that later in another series. Boosting up your confidence in okay, I spoke up for my stuff. I stood up for myself when I acknowledged that. Even if a boundary is crossed, right? It's not the end all be all at all times, right? If a boundary is crossed, you acknowledging it and saying, hey, this boundary was crossed. Can we talk about it? That's showing self-love, and that's showing self-respect, and that's standing up for yourself, right? So once again, even with crossing the boundaries, depending on how big they're crossed, right? But I'm specifically talking about in the marriages, if boundaries are crossed, right? And let's say that it's that phone call that you didn't get. Said he was going to call, or she said she was going to call at this time, but she did not call. Well, let's bring that to the table. Let's talk about that. What happened? Let's explain. How can we grow from this? How can we be better from this? Right? So, like I said, I hope that was helpful. Be sure to share this live. Now, I know a lot of you all on last week got the freebie, but for those that did not get the freebie, I do have a freebie, and it is an ebook of the 7 steps to grow in self-love and self-respect for yourself. Now, this is an ebook for men and women, right? I want you all to grow in this area. Like I said on last week, I want your year of 2022 to be all about self-love, to be all about self-respect, to be all about true inner healing in Christ, right? You can do it, and it is honestly, it's time to do it, right? Haven't others created boundaries enough for you? Isn't it time for you to create your own boundaries? Yes, make sure you get that freebie. So Erin's already commenting, she's got the freebie, but if you would like the freebie, if you're on Instagram and you would like the freebie, DM me with your email and I'll send it over to you. If you're on Facebook and you would like the freebies, just simply go into the comments and say, I need that ebook, right? I I need that ebook. So yes, it is definitely time. So I'm super excited about that. Had a lot of great feedback from those that received it on last week and how they're excited to get started with the step-by-step. Listen, this is not no cheesy ebook. It is something that's very practical. If you know me, if you've ever been to my nonprofit organization, Dancing in the Rain Ministries events, you know that I am practical one-on-one, and I like to do step-by-step, right? And so I'm helping you to show self-love and self-respect step-by-step with this freebie. So if you would like it, make sure that you DM me on Instagram, and then you can just simply type it in the comments on Facebook. Once again, share this live. In closing, we have 2 more parts to this series. So why self-love and self-respect is essential, and you need it to go to your next level. Come on, somebody. You need it to go into the new year. You need to go into, like I said on last week, come on. Like scripture says, it's time to go from glory to glory. I believe that it's time for you to go from self-love to self-love. Come on, somebody. It's time for you to go from new realms of self-respect to new realms of self-respect, and go into the new year bold. And so we got 2 more parts to this series. On next week, Monday at 6:30 p.m. Central, we're going to be talking about self-honor, right? And the Bible speaks a lot about honor. And so I want you to join me next week to see how honor, right, for others correlates to honor for yourself. So we're going to be talking about that one, and that's going to be really awesome. I've had the opportunity to really learn about honor in this year, so I'm excited to share some nuggets with that. And then the last series, the 4th Monday of this month, we're going to be talking about confidence, right? And that, once you go through these steps, if you get the ebook and go through that step by step, the self-confidence part is honestly probably the easiest part, because you've done all the work to get to the true inner healing, the true self-love, the true self-respect. So self-confidence is honestly the easy part, right? So, hey, Coach Nikki, I see that she's here. So make sure you all DM me if you would like that. I will see you on next Monday at 6:30. Once again, I am Brianca Hardy, the Inner Healing Life Coach. I specialize in all things inner healing. I am purposed to help you cultivate self-love and self-respect for yourself, to teach you how to heal from toxic relationships and how to overcome those mother wounds and father wounds. Why is all that needed? Because in life, when we go through traumatic experiences or hard experiences, guess what happens? Our soul then has wounds. And it's my purpose to help you get at the root of those wounds so that you can heal, and so that you can deal with them and heal from them holy, right? In Christ. So once again, that's who I am. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and I will see you next Monday. Have a great rest of your night.